Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Communicating with Youth, a Strengths-Based Approach, hosted by the Resource Basket and Alaska Afterschool Network. Due to some technical difficulties with audio from last week's webinar, this will be a re-recording. The content will remain the same from last week's training, but the interactive components may vary. This recording will be made available on the Resource Basket website early next week, and I will also be sending out an email to all those who have registered with the link to access it. So brief introduction before I turn it over to our presenters. My name is Anna Wong, and I will be your host for today's training. I am the AmeriCorps Vista with the Resource Basket. The Resource Basket is an online training and technical assistance center for those who work with youth. Our website, www.alaskanativeYouth.org, provides resources, opportunities for training and funding, as well as stories and blogs of youth and their successes across the state. With me today is Chrystle Tebo, Program Coordinator from Boys and Girls Clubs Alaska, and Thomas Azzarella, Director of the Alaska Afterschool Network. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Hi guys, this is Chrystle Tebo from Boys and Girls Clubs Alaska. I'm excited to be able to be sharing our Boys and Girls Clubs of America's strengths-based youth development approach. Feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will be displayed at the very end of this training. So throughout this training, we're going to focus predominantly on looking at the youth we serve in our programs from a strengths perspective. But as we go through, remember that the same concepts are important in the ways that we supervise staff, work with families of our kids in the programs, and also look at partnerships that we have around our communities. We hope that this training will teach you the concepts behind the strengths-based strategy and some practical ways that you can use to incorporate them into your youth development style. So, without further ado,
for the purpose of today's webinar, we're going to be using the term youth program frequently. A youth program can be anything from a traditional after-school program, like a Boys and Girls Club or a campfire program, and it can also include programs such as a native dance group, a summer camp, or a cultural camp program, or it could just be a group of youth that you're working with and volunteering with after school. So when you hear the term youth program, use it however you feel best fits your description.
Excellent. Okay, so first we're going to look at the basic framework. So a strengths framework is scientifically grounded. There's science and research that comes behind putting this youth development strategy together. Originally, it was generated from the social work field, experiences in social work. This strengths framework is at the heart of Boys and Girls Clubs of America's youth development strategy. A strengths framework works off the principle that all people have strengths. A lot of times you'll see strengths framework referred to in other youth development literature as positive psychology, or sometimes called assets, protective factors, resiliency, and competencies. The foundation of using a strengths framework and how our programs are run, how we work with youth, etc., is a belief that youth are active participants in their development and that all youth have strengths. Each and every single person has strengths. Okay, so in its simplest form, the strengths framework looks like this. Discover the strengths, identify what's going well, develop those strengths by offering opportunities for that youth to utilize that strength, and apply those strengths in other areas. Using a strengths-based perspective basically means we want to focus on the strengths and manage weaknesses. For many, this is a new concept because we haven't been trained our entire lives, back up. For the majority of our professional careers, we've kind of been trained to work from a deficit framework, which is, here's what's wrong with you and here's how we're going to fix it. It's just kind of how our brains naturally work. We see a problem, we want to try and fix the problem. This approach, a strength-based youth development approach, will help you seek out strengths instead of problems. Strengths can be external or internal, and again are also called assets or protective factors. For example, an external strength could be that a young person has a really great support network, a really supportive family at home, or an internal strength could be something like a strong sense of caring or honesty. So let's use an example of discover, develop, apply so you guys can see how this kind of fits into our world. Let's say you have a kiddo who is really great at basketball. They put a lot of time and energy, a lot of work into improving their basketball game. So we discover that as the strength. The strength is that they put a lot of time and energy and work into improving their basketball game. We want to help this kiddo, first of all, recognize that this is a strength that they have. Next, we want to offer opportunities for them to use that strength. Maybe we set it up so that when we're doing basketball, we allow him opportunities to kind of help assist with the younger kids or something of that nature. And then eventually we want to work our way toward helping this kiddo use the same strength, the dedication and the work ethic in other areas, such as maybe completing homework or raising a grade at school. Strengths are emotional or behavioral skills. When we're focusing on strengths, they really help us increase motivation. Without motivation, there's not going to be much interest on the part of the youth in wanting to make a change for better or different. Strengths help us create a sense of competence or personal accomplishment in the youth that we're focusing on. And also, when you're focused on strengths, it makes the relationship with you and the youth that you're working with much more positive and much more satisfying for both parties. Much of what we hear and see in our society teaches us to focus on problems, weaknesses, and challenges, and then tells us that we should find ways to overcome or fix those problems. This point of view impacts how supervisors lead staff, how we work with young people in our programs every day. Strengths research and practices support training our staff to shift their point of view, to look for more strengths and potential in our fellow coworkers, staff, youth, and the families that we work with. The focus is on where people are going rather than where they've been. The focus is on what's really great about this person, what's working, versus, well, here's this problem and that problem, and they have this problem too. So, when we're talking about using a strengths-based approach with kids, what works and what doesn't? Strengths-based approaches work really well with those challenging youth in our programs. When you're using a strengths-based approach, because you're focused on positive, fun just automatically happens within your program. When you're working from a strengths-based approach, you're innately enhancing your kids' ability to deal with stress and adversity. When they have a problem, you're helping them use their strengths to kind of work through that problem. And we're going to, by using our strengths-based approach, promote moral, social, emotional skill and other types of development. Focusing on positives helps kids continue to improve in all areas. When we're talking about challenging youth, I think it's important to note strategies that work well with challenging youth also work well with the less challenging youth in our program, but not vice versa. That's to say, what works really well with the easy kids, the low-risk kids, doesn't necessarily work on our harder to reach kids, the high needs kids, the high risk kids. Higher needs kids are the ones that we see with more behavioral challenges. They're the ones that we see in our programs with less exposure to structure, maybe at home or at school. They're the ones that we work with who have learned not to trust adults. They're the kiddos who have a history, sadly, of abuse or neglect. There are kids who have been bullied, and most oftentimes the higher needs kids have a really low self-esteem. When a program incorporates strengths into the framework of their youth development strategy, fun, like I said, just happens automatically like that. Members feel, or the youth that we work with feel safe to have fun. For harder to reach kids or high risk kids, fun may be less a part of their experience in our program than the other kids because they're more likely to get into trouble in our programs. They're more likely to be the ones getting yelled at or get suspended or sent to the office. These are the kids that are most likely to stop coming because the experience that they have in our programs is not necessarily a positive one. But we know that people learn and grow more easily if they're having fun while they're learning. So it's especially important to focus on ensuring that the youth who need us most are getting the strengths-based experience in our program as well. So on a blank piece of paper, we're gonna draw a little T-chart. At the top of that piece of paper, I want you to jot down the name of your most challenging kiddo. We're going to divide the paper into 2 columns. On the left, we're going to be listing problems that we see in this particular kid, whether it's problems that the kid has or that they have in their environment. Okay, go ahead and start listing your problems. Okay, so before moving over to the right side of the paper, to the right-hand column, I want you guys to think about how meticulous you were when you were listing those problems. Use that same careful mindset to identify all the strengths that you see in this kiddo and their environment. Remember that strengths are internal and external. Look for any scrap. Think of the times that this person surprised you. Ask what helps him or her do so well. So go ahead and start listing your strengths. Okay, so this activity for me was really useful and I found it really fascinating. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one who found it a little bit more challenging to come up with or list strengths. I had a harder time listing strengths than I did listing problems, which is interesting because I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but we had more time to list strengths than we did to list problems, and we still felt that that it was a little bit more difficult. So, in conclusion to this activity, changing our way of thinking about the youth that we serve is going to require a shift in how we do things as an entire youth development program. It takes a lot of work and a lot of conscious effort to shift your focus from problems to strengths. So speaking of shifts, we are going to look at a few different culture shifts that are necessary to begin really utilizing a strengths-based approach in your youth development program. There are 3 types of shifts that will help the development of strengths-based culture in your program. First, we're going to look at the difference between a deficit framework and a strengths framework. If we look at them side by side, it's really easy to compare the differences. That's why I really love this slide. So we want to move from a deficit framework, we want to move from looking for problems to fix to promoting development of strengths. We want to move from focusing on past failures and frustrations to a culture that provides imageries of success for that kid. You got to set expectations of success, and then those kids will rise to the occasion. We want to move from working to prevent negative things from happening to, we want to move to promoting positive. We want to move from being reactive to being proactive. We want to move from being punishment focused, you do this and the consequence is this, now you must sit on the bench, to using guidance and feedback. We want to move from being problem focused to being solution focused. Much of society's approaches to dealing with higher risk youth and disengaged families is through the lens of their weaknesses or problems that need to be fixed. This is a deficit framework, and it requires professionals to focus on families' failures, and it sets them up for negative expectations, kind of like self-fulfilling prophecies. It's often demoralizing and stigmatizing to the youth and families. It also works to decrease motivation. Youth and families who feel marginalized by community systems who view them as a problem, they need help to build connections to the community around them. So let's spend a little bit of time thinking about how adopting a strengths framework will impact our programming decisions. We're going to read a little bit of a story here. Thomas is going to share a story.
This story is called A Rabbit on the Swim Team. Once upon a time, the animals decided they should do something meaningful, so they organized a school. They adopted an activity curriculum of running, climbing, swimming, and flying. To make it easier to administer the curriculum, all the animals took all the subjects. The rabbit started at the top of his class in running, but developed a nervous twitch in his leg muscles because of so much makeup work in swimming. The duck was an excellent swimmer. In fact, better than the instructor. But he made only passing grades in flying and was very poor at running. Since he was so slow in running, he had to drop swimming and stay after school to practice running. This caused his web feet to be badly worn, so that he was only average at swimming. But average was quite acceptable, so no one worried about that, except for the duck. The squirrel was an excellent at climbing, but he encountered constant frustration in flying class because his teacher made him start from the ground up instead of from the treetops down. He developed a Charlie horse from overexertion, and so he only got a C in climbing and a D in running. The eagle was the problem child and was severely disciplined for being a nonconformist. In a climbing class, he beat all the others to the top of the tree, but insisted on using his own way of getting there. Each creature has its own set of capabilities in which it will naturally excel, unless it is expected or forced to fill a mold that doesn't fit.
This is a story that I am especially fond of. I feel like it is really great at illustrating how we in our programs, how school systems tend to set up these boxes that we expect them to be one size fits all, and all the kids are going to be able to fit into this nice, neat little box. And then we tend to really be negative toward them when they don't meet those exact parameters or those exact expectations that we set for every single child. Of course, we all know that all kids aren't the same, so of course they're not all going to fit into the same box. So think about, how does this play out in the lives of the kids in your community? How do you see this? And also think about, how do you see this playing out in your program specifically? So the next culture shift that we're going to look at is punishment versus guidance. Like the eagle in the story, sometimes we end up punishing young people who do not conform to the expectations that we set for our groups. Part of creating a safe environment is establishing reasonable expectations and supporting those expectations. Many youth development professionals struggle with how to support and establish healthy boundaries. Supporting expectations by using punitive measures has been proven to be ineffective. So not only does it make everyone feel bad after the punishment is given, it generally doesn't result in any changed behavior. The kid gets in trouble for running down the hallway. You make him sit on the bench for 10 minutes because he's 10 years old. Does he magically never run down the hallway again? No. So some examples of negative reinforcement that we all use more than we'd like to in our programs: yelling, threatening, suspending, loss of privilege. This is something that I personally have had a really hard time with over the 8 years that I've worked with youth. I try really hard to remind myself to be proactive, not reactive. One example from my time in a clubhouse here in Anchorage, we had a really tight-knit group of 6th grade girls. They had all been attending the club for a really long time, although they didn't go to the same schools. It was the summer before they all were going to be starting middle school. They were all coming from separate elementary schools. They were all going to be starting middle school the next school year at the same middle school. In particular, there was one little gal who was really quite masterful at getting the other girls to turn against each other in an effort to see who would get the privilege of being her BFF for that day. I spent hours trying to talk to this girl, get her to see how mean and manipulative she was being and the damaging effects it had on the other girls. I felt like no matter how much I talked, I felt that she was never able to see the big picture that I was trying to draw for her. I tried everything. I tried sending her home. I tried making her do some club service, like maybe cleaning the cafe. I tried loss of privileges. None of it worked. It became a battle between she and I. Eventually, it filtered out onto her mom. Her mom used to come in every day and pick her up from the club, chit-chat with the staff. Eventually, she got sick of me telling her about all the bratty things her kid had been up to that day, so she just stopped coming in to get her. She would just call into the kids line and have somebody send her outside. It's not a situation that I'm proud of, but it was a really pivotal learning moment for me. So now let's examine the other side of this, which is guidance. Research shows positive reinforcement works. Social attention is a great example of positive reinforcement. Social attention would be something like drawing attention to their positive behavior. Hey, I see Alicia pulling out her homework. Way to be on top of it, Alicia. You're drawing attention to the whole group of the positive behavior that Alicia is demonstrating. praise individually, individual attention. You go to Alicia and you tell her, hey, Alicia, I noticed you came in and started on your homework straight away. Good job. And then encouragement, also on an individual basis, would look something like, Alicia, I see that you've been working really hard at making sure you get your homework complete every day. Keep it up. Good work. Guidance includes things like feedback, structure, discipline, and requires a measure of individualization because each kid is different. Different things that work for one aren't going to work for another. So this is going to take it's going to take time. It's going to take planning. It's going to take forethought. And it's going to take you, instead of just reacting automatically, it's going to take you stepping back for a second, thinking about the situation, and then deciding how to proceed from a strengths-based approach. However, supporting established expectations from a strengths-based approach is more effective, and it will really help turn the mood of a strained situation around. Using a guidance approach, using a positive reinforcement, it takes practice. It's not something that you're going to do perfectly right off the bat. You're going to have to do trial and error. Keep working at it. It's not always easy or the first thing that comes to mind in response to challenging behaviors. Sometimes we get so caught up in the challenges or the problems that we don't give any attention or reinforcement to the other kids who are demonstrating positive actions. So I'll give you the conclusion to the story of my 6th grade drama queen. I decided that I needed to repair this relationship. We were heading towards the end of the summer, getting ready to start the school year. You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, so I did everything I could to make a big deal about all the positive things that she did, no matter how, trivial or small. She came in the building and signed in without me asking her to. Excellent. She came to Power Hour after school to do her homework. I'm so glad you're here. Awesome. She turned in a permission slip to go on a field trip. That's a very basic thing, right? Just turning in the permission slip. Wonderful. I'm so excited you're going to be going with us. The turning point, though, was when I asked her specifically to be a peer mediator, to kind of be the go-between for the younger kids when they were having conflicts or problems. I made it her job to help peacefully resolve conflicts amongst the other kids in the clubhouse. As soon as I empowered her and gave her the positive attention that she needed, it was like she was a completely new kid. So, as I mentioned, a guidance approach is not the first thing that comes to mind. It's not the first way that we tend to go when things get challenging, but that doesn't mean that you can't turn it around. Also, don't get bummed out when it doesn't work after the first attempt. It takes time and consistency. Again, the kid's not going to make, overnight changes because you told him good job for doing his homework one day. It's going to take a lot of consistency over a period of time. So we're going to share another story.
This story is called Lifeguard Work. It's not uncommon for a drowning person to surrender to panic or terror and to actually fight the lifeguard who's trying to help. In fact, sometimes a person in such a dangerous situation will resist powerfully and forcefully and fight off every attempt to be rescued. Lifeguards are not surprised by this response. They are ready to encounter resistance and will do anything to save a life. One thing a lifeguard never does is swim away from a drowning person, especially when the victim is resisting help. A lifeguard never treads water at a safe distance and yells out that she will only provide help when proper motivation and compliance are demonstrated. The lifeguard never says, "Well, obviously, you are not ready for my help. Take a little time now, think about that, and when you're ready to be saved, give me a signal by raising your hand, and I'll rescue you. No, genuine lifeguards have no requirements to be met before they will help. In fact, their own desire to save the person energizes them to fight the resistance, to risk their own lives, and do what's necessary to get the job done. Sometimes this means subduing the drowning person and taking them safely to shore. Your work is nothing less than that of a lifeguard. Be prepared and ever watchful. Expect resistance, subdue it if necessary, but never swim away.
This is another one of those stories that I think is just, it was kind of an aha moment for me. I listened to this story and they talk about, okay, well, as soon as you can control your wild flailing and calm down, I will swim to you and rescue you. That doesn't happen, right? But that's exactly what we do to our kids. That's exactly what we do to our kids. So this, to me, was just a really great story. I really love this story. We do serious work. As youth development professionals, we need to swim toward the youth that's fighting us, not away. Like lifeguards, we should not be focused on looking to blame someone, like the youth, but instead on how to make the situation better. How do we save this kid who is clearly demonstrating that he needs us? Because many of the kids who need us most are drowning in other ways in their lives. We don't have any idea what's going on in their lives outside of a lot of times we don't have any idea what's going on in their lives outside of our programs, emotionally, socially, educationally. And we're tasked with being the lifeguards that help them through those waters. So, how do we stay in the game with kids when they need us most? How do we fight those drowning kids that are fighting against us? The more you can develop the proactive pieces of this, the less you will need the reactive responses. Give attention to what you want to see rather than what you want to stop. Use the discover, develop, apply method. See what's going right. Make sure that you call attention to that. Let that kid know, I see that this is a strength that you have. Find ways for them to develop that strength. Give them opportunities to use it a lot. And then find ways that they can apply that strength in other areas. Incorporate positive reinforcement throughout the club. Recognition, positive recognition, it goes a really long way, whether it's small or large. And also teach skills that give kids alternatives. Again, don't wait for the conflict to begin teaching conflict resolution. Be proactive about teaching kids skills that they'll need to solve problems. You can't tell kids to stop doing one behavior until you teach them to do a positive behavior to replace the negative one that you're trying to get them to stop. So, remember that this doesn't happen overnight. Change doesn't happen overnight, though. Don't think that you can catch a kid doing one thing right one time and it will miraculously change them forever and ever. Kids have learned over time that they get attention when they're getting into trouble, and it'll take time to change this expectation. Also, when you begin making this a part of your culture in your program or the way that you do things, you'll find that it spreads. If you as a youth development professional start modeling this and demonstrating this, then you'll see that it kind of rubs off on the peers that are working alongside you, and you'll see them kind of start speaking the same language, using the same methods. Identify the strength that the kid has, work with them to do more of it, use positive recognition, and help them build on it. Okay, strengths-based guidance. It is important that all staff support youth even through mistakes. It is critical to ensuring a safe environment for youth to feel like they can explore situations and outcomes in our programs and remain supported and cared about. When they fall down or make mistakes, the focus should be on getting back up rather than the fall itself. Again, use the discover, develop, apply approach. What are the things that this kid does really, really well? What's happening in the moments when the kid is doing well? Does the time of day matter? Does the group size make a difference? Do they do better in small groups or large groups? If they do better with certain staff, what is the difference in those interactions with that staff that makes the difference? Is it worth you trying to replicate that? Always remember to remain solution focused. It's very easy to get stuck on trying to fix the problem, but similar to the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, we tend to get more of what we focus on. So if you're focusing your time and attention on searching for solutions, the youth will learn to focus on improving. We won't feel like people mostly focus on what is wrong with them. They won't feel like people mostly focus on what is wrong with them. And they'll really drive the staff to build up the skills necessary in the child to improve the situation. For example, we often tell kids to stop fighting, but we can't tell a kid to stop doing something if we, again, haven't given them an alternative behavior. For some youth, they haven't developed those alternative behaviors, so that the only thing that they know is fighting. So, last culture shift that we're going to look at today, fixed versus growth. Thomas is going to enlighten us.
Hi everyone, again this is Thomas with Alaska Afterschool Network. We're going to talk a little bit about fixed mindset versus growth mindsets. Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck did research on this area and found that there's two different types of mindsets people have, fixed and growth. And really what that means, when you boil it down to, is really the person's ability to think of how can I view my world or view my life. If I'm looking from a fixed mindset, I'm looking as, well, this is the kind of cards I'm dealt with and I'm stuck with it. A growth mindset is looking at, these might be the cards I have in my hands right now, but if I keep playing the game, I have an opportunity to move myself forward. At the heart of her research was an experiment she did with students inside of a 5th grade class in New York City. What she did for this research was really look to see what happens when young people have an exposure from a caring adult or a supportive adult like a teacher, and how does that affect their mindset? Are we innately in fixed mindset or growth mindset, and what can adults in a young person's life do to help that young person move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? Her experiment was set up with one classroom, a 5th grade class, that was working on math problems. At the start of her experiment, all the kids in the class were given a simple math puzzle that they should be able to complete based on the assignments and work that they had previously been doing. They split the room in half, and the teacher gave half of the classroom praise for their intelligence and the other half praise for their effort. Things like praise for their intelligence look like, wow, you must be smart at this, or man, you're really smart. Those are things where we're using praise about a person's intelligence. The other second half of the classroom received praise for their effort. Wow, you must have worked really hard on this, or I can see that you took a lot of time concentrating and writing out the steps on your problem. Round 2 of the experiment was a choice between a similar puzzle or a more difficult learning opportunity. Most of the children who had been received praise for their intelligence, so again that, wow, you're so smart, wound up picking an easy puzzle. Kids who were praised for their effort, wow, you're working really hard on this, wound up picking harder puzzles and challenged themselves to try harder on a more challenging situation. Round 3 of our experiment, the kids had no choice in which type of puzzle they had. And all the children were given a puzzle that was harder than the current level that they've had exposure to. What she found was that children in half the classroom that received praise for their intelligence, again, wow, you're so smart at this, or you're really good at this, what she found was that most of those students assumed I'm not very smart, and I'm stressed, and I'm going to fail at this because this is difficult. For kids who receive that praise for their effort, wow, I can tell you've really been working hard on this problem. They assumed that they just hadn't focused hard enough and were willing to keep trying until they found a solution, and they enjoyed what they were working on. In the 4th round of her experiment, all the students were given an easy puzzle that was just as easy as the one given in round 1. Children who received praise on their initial puzzle and throughout the experiment did 20% worse than they did on the first round of easy puzzles. Children who were praised for their effort wound up doing 30% better than they did the first time. This really highlights the difference between giving that shallow, superficial praise of, wow, you're so smart, or wow, you look so pretty today, opposed to really helping a young person look inside of themselves and see the things that they did to help them succeed. Again, we want to encourage young people and give them praise based on their effort. I noticed you really put in a lot of effort the last couple weeks. I'm practicing your swing at baseball. It's really starting to pay off. Or it may be, wow, I've noticed that you've learned all the lyrics to the song this week, and you were just given those lyrics this past week. That's really impressive. I'm amazed by how much effort and extra time you've put in to learning these new lyrics.
So, to give you some more examples of the difference between the point of view for a fixed and a growth mindset, looks a little bit like this. A fixed mindset would say things along the lines of, are you sure you can do it? Maybe you don't have the talent. Whereas a growth mindset would say things more like, well, I'm not sure that I can do it now, but I think I can learn to do it with time and effort. Fixed mindsets, what if you fail? You'll be a failure. Growth mindsets tend to be more along the thought process of most successful people have had failures along the way. So I think that you guys can see the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. And if you think about it a little bit, you can identify a little bit of both of those sides in yourself. So, some easy first steps to help you create a more strengths-based culture in your program. Again, we talked about how it kind of spreads from one person to another. If you are role modeling this, if you're working from a strengths-based approach, you'll see that it tends to kind of rub off on the staff working with you and also on the kids. Do not take it personal. It is extremely important that you and your staff and colleagues always remember that the kids we serve, the kids that come into our doors, they come with their own stories, experiences, struggles, baggage. And when they struggle in our programs, when they're disrespectful, when they break the rules, when they don't reach as high as we know that they can, it is not about us. Their struggles are not a direct reflection of what kind of a youth development professional we are. It's not about you. We have to remember not to take it personal and to keep working. It should be all of our goals to ensure that when kids do leave our programs, whether it's at the end of, the summer or at the end of the day or what have you, that they leave bigger, better, and stronger than when they first came in. We want to give choices rather than saying just no. I will never forget when I first started working in a licensed childcare with some little tiny kids, ages 2 and 3. I had to eliminate the word no from my vocabulary because it would immediately prompt temper tantrums. So you have to offer them some alternatives. Well, let's not run right now. Maybe we should skip or hop. Focus on, set yourself up for some goals. If you want to try implementing this in your program, set some goals for yourself. Maybe it looks like focusing on one asset a week or a month. Make it a goal of yours to say 2 things to each kid that you notice about them. Make 2 positive comments. Identify 2 of their strengths in the period of a week. So, as a wrap up, engaging youth through their strengths, I wanted to bring it back around to the discover, develop, apply thing because it's just a really easy way to remember what a strengths-based approach is. Make this your mantra. Discover, develop, apply. Discover, recognizing the existing strengths. Also remember that you have to let that kid know that that is a strength of theirs. They may not know it. So keep that in mind. Build those strengths, develop those strengths, and ultimately use those strengths as a bridge into other program areas. If they're really strong leaders on the basketball court, what are you going to do to bridge that into other program areas? How are you going to get them to use that leadership, those leadership strengths of theirs in the game room or in the school? So that brings us to the end of our presentation.
We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today for today's webinar. As you can see on the screen is our contact information, so you can reach out to Chrystle Tebo at Boys and Girls Club of Alaska, myself, Thomas Azzarella with Alaska Afterschool Network, or Anna Wong at the Resource Basket.
I know many of you have already taken our survey, and we really, really appreciate the feedback you gave us. Many of you have noted the audio, and we are working towards fixing that. But if you have not taken the survey, please take a minute to take the 4-question survey by clicking the link on the slide that we have up. We have also listed our email, as Thomas has mentioned. So this is the first webinar of a series that the Resource Basket and Alaska After School Network will be offering. You can find more information about webinars we will be offering in August and November coming up, and you can visit the Resource Basket to see more information about that. If you haven't already, check us both out on Facebook at the Resource Basket in Alaska After School. And if you would like to be on our newsletter, please email either Thomas or myself if you would like to join our newsletters. So thank you all for being so patient, and we will make sure the audio works next time. So you get the recording on time. Thank you.